If you're buying a home in the DMV and you've not done this before, or you haven't done it in 10 years, I need you to hear something. This is not the process you've been reading about online. It's not the process your cousin went through in Charlotte, and it's definitely not what that TikTok told you. The DC metro area has 3 separate jurisdictions, 3 different tax structures, and about a dozen quirks that will cost you real money if you do not see them coming. Today I'm walking you through the entire timeline, pre-approval through closing day, with every DMV specific thing you actually need to know. Here is the common belief. You get pre-approved, you find a house, you make an offer, and then you close. 4 steps, nice and clean. And if you're buying in a market that only has one set of rules, that's roughly how it goes. But the DMV is not that market. You could be looking at a townhouse in Silver Spring on Monday and a single-family home in Arlington on Wednesday. And those 2 transactions will have different transfer taxes, different closing customs, different disclosure timelines, and in some cases, a completely different person sitting at the head of the settlement table. Most agents gloss over this. They hand you a generic buyer guide and hope you don't ask too many questions. I'm going to do the opposite today. I'm going to take you through every phase of this process in order, and at each step, I'm going to tell you exactly where the DMV version of this diverges from what you may have read online. My name is Charlie Bengel. I lead The Collective, a top-producing team at RE/MAX Allegiance, and I'm also the CEO of the brokerage itself. We sell nearly $1 billion across the DC metro area every year. I've been doing this for 27 years. I have seen every version of this process go right and every version go sideways. So let us make sure yours goes right. Here's the plan. I'm going to walk you through 7 phases. Pre-approval, the home search, making an offer, the contract period, the appraisal, the final countdown, and closing day. Along the way, I'll flag exactly where DC, Maryland, and Virginia do things differently, and I'll give you the stuff that actually matters, the stuff that saves you money or keeps you from losing a deal. Let's start where every smart buyer starts, and it's not Zillow, it's the pre-approval. And I don't mean the pre-qualification you got in 10 minutes from some online portal. I mean a real pre-approval where a lender has pulled your credit, verified your income, looked at your assets, and given you a letter that says this person can actually close. In the DMV, this is not optional. It is table stakes. When you write an offer on a home in Falls Church or Bethesda or Capitol Hill, you're competing against people who are buttoned up. Listing agents here will literally call your lender to verify the letter is real. If your pre-approval is soft, your offer goes to the bottom of the pile. Here's the DMV specific piece most people miss. You need to understand how much home you can actually afford here, not just what the bank says you qualify for. And that means understanding property taxes across jurisdictions. Fairfax County is running roughly $1.11 per $1,000 of assessed value. Arlington is about $1.01. Go across the river to Montgomery County and you're looking at a higher rate, but their assessment methodology is different. And DC has its own structure entirely with homestead deductions that can change your monthly picture dramatically. So, when your lender says you qualify for $750, that number means something very different depending on which side of the Potomac you end up on. A good lender in this market will run scenarios across all 3 jurisdictions so you know what your actual monthly payment looks like in each one. If your lender has not done that, find one who will. By the way, if you're relocating to the DMV or you're getting ready to buy and you want a clear picture of how this all works for your specific situation, click the link below to schedule a strategy session with our team. We'll map out a timeline that is actually built around your move date, your budget, and the jurisdictions you're targeting. Free, no pressure, just a real conversation. And the link's in the description. Now, before we get into the search itself, let me tell you about the one thing that will completely change how you experience the rest of this process. Phase 2, the search. And here is where I need you to reset your expectations. If you're coming from a market where homes sit for 60 or 90 days, you're going to feel like someone hit the fast forward button. In Northern Virginia, the average days on market for well-priced homes in places like Vienna, Fairfax, or Reston can be under 2 weeks. In hot pockets of Arlington or Alexandria, we regularly see homes go under contract in just a weekend. In desirable parts of Montgomery County, like Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Kensington, same speed. In a DC proper, it depends entirely on the neighborhood and the price point. A well-priced 3-bedroom in Petworth moves fast. A luxury condo in Georgetown or a row home in Capitol Hill might sit a bit longer. But anything priced correctly in the sweet spot is getting attention rather quickly. The point is this: you cannot casually browse in the DMV. By the time you see a listing on Zillow and think, that looks nice, there might already be 5 offers on it. The search phase in this market is not passive, it's active. You need to have your criteria dialed in, your agent monitoring inventory in real time, and your schedule flexible enough to see homes quickly. I tell every buyer we work with the same thing. If you see a home hit the market on a Thursday and you wait until Sunday to see it, you might already be too late. Let me give you a practical example. A family we worked with recently was moving from Texas and wanted to be in the McLean or Great Falls area. They assumed they could fly in, spend a long weekend looking, and make a decision. By the time they arrived on a Friday afternoon, 2 of the 5 homes they had saved online were already under contract. We pivoted, got them into 3 others that had just listed that morning, and they wrote an offer that night. That's the pace of this market. It's not meant to scare you, it's meant to prepare you. Here's another DMV specific thing: the buyer-broker agreement. Under the current rules that rolled out nationally, you're going to sign a written agreement with your agent before you tour homes. This is a good thing. It means you have a clear understanding of what your agent is doing for you, how they're going to be compensated, and what services you're going to receive. But in a 3-jurisdiction market like the DMV, you also want to make sure that your agent is set up to show you homes across state lines without creating a logistical nightmare. Some agents only work Virginia, some only work Maryland. If your search crosses the river or crosses the Beltway, which in the DMV it often does, you want someone who can move with you seamlessly. Our team works across all 3 jurisdictions every day. That's not a marketing line, that's literally how this market works. One more thing about the search. Schools. I'm not going to tell you which schools are good and which schools are not. That's your research to do. But I will tell you that in the DMV, the school district boundaries can run right through what looks like a single neighborhood. I've seen 2 homes on the same street in Fairfax County feed into different high schools. In Montgomery County, school assignment areas have shifted multiple times in recent years. If schools are part of your decision, verify the assignment for each specific property, not just the neighborhood. Your agent and the school district websites can help you confirm. Now, you found the house. Your heart is racing, you want it. Here is exactly what happens next. Phase 3, writing the offer. And this is where the 3-jurisdiction thing really starts to matter, because Virginia, Maryland, and DC each use different contract forms, and each one has different default terms, different contingency structures, and different timelines baked in. In Virginia, you're likely using the NVAR contract, which is incredibly detailed. It has specific contingency, addenda for financing, inspections, appraisal, and more. In Maryland, the MAR contract is the standard, and it handles some of these contingencies differently, particularly around the inspection process. In DC, you often see the GCAR form. Each of these contracts handles things like the home inspection contingency, the financing contingency, and the appraisal contingency with different language. Different default timelines and different rights for you as the buyer. Let me give you a real example. In Virginia, the standard home inspection contingency gives you a defined number of days to complete inspections and then a specific process for negotiating repairs or requesting a price reduction. There's a defined resolution period where you go back and forth with the seller. In Maryland, the structure is similar in concept, but the mechanics and the timelines differ. The point is not to memorize every clause. The point is to have an agent who knows which contract you're working with and what the default terms actually mean for your negotiating position. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen a buyer or even an agent from outside the area trip over a deadline because they assumed the Virginia contract worked the same as the Maryland one. Here is something else most buyers do not think about: escalation clauses. In the DMV, escalation clauses are common, especially on anything priced under $1 million in a desirable area. An escalation clause basically says I'll pay X dollars above the highest competing offer up to a maximum of Y. They're a tool, a powerful one, but if they're written poorly, they can actually hurt you. I've seen buyers escalate themselves out of a good deal because the clause was sloppy. And I've also seen listing agents reject escalation clauses entirely because they were not written in a format the seller's side was comfortable with. The way these are structured matters as much as the numbers. And then there is earnest money. In the DMV, earnest money deposits are typically larger than what you see nationally. We commonly see deposits of 1 to 3% of the purchase price, and sometimes more, especially in competitive situations. On a $700,000 home, that could be $7,000 to $21,000 sitting in escrow. That money's usually deposited with the settlement company, and it is at risk if you default outside of your contingencies. So this is not the time to be casual about what you're committing to. Have a conversation with your agent about what is competitive in the specific neighborhood you're targeting, because what works in Ashburn is different from what works in Cleveland Park. Settlement date flexibility, a willingness to do a post-settlement occupancy, aka a rent back, if the seller needs time to move, a larger earnest money deposit. These are all tools you can use. A strong offer in the DMV is not just the highest number, it's the offer that makes the seller feel the most confident that the deal is going to close. Your deal is going to close. Speaking of risk, let me tell you about the phase that makes or breaks most deals in the DMV. Phase 4, the contract period. You're under contract. Congratulations, but this is not the finish line. This is where the real work begins, and honestly, this is the phase where I've seen most deals either get saved or fall apart. First up, the home inspection. In the DMV, you're typically looking at a general home inspection, and then, depending on the property, you may also want a radon test, a wood-destroying insect inspection, aka a termite inspection, a sewer scope, and if the home has a well or septic system, those get their own inspections too. For homes in parts of Loudoun County, Prince William County, or out toward Frederick, Maryland, well and septic inspections are not optional, they're essential. I've seen a failed septic system cost a buyer $30,000 to replace. That's not something you want to discover after closing. Radon is another big one. A lot of people do not realize that the DMV sits in a region with naturally elevated radon levels, particularly in parts of Northern Virginia and Montgomery County. A radon test is inexpensive, usually around $150, and if it comes back high, mitigation systems are effective and relatively affordable. But you need to test it during your contingency period so you can negotiate with the seller on who covers the fix. Now here's the part that catches people off guard: the HOA and condo disclosure packages. If you're buying in a community with the Homeowners Association, and in Northern Virginia and Montgomery County, that's a significant percentage of homes, the seller is required to provide you with the HOA disclosure package. In Virginia, once you receive that packet, you have a 3-day right of rescission to review it. 3 days. That's not a lot of time to review financials, reserve studies, meeting minutes, and pending litigation. And in some of these communities, the packets are 200 pages long. Let me tell you what to look for, because buyers flip through and look at the monthly fee and move on. Look at the reserve study. Is the association adequately funded? If the reserves are low, a special assessment may be coming. Look at pending litigation. Is the association suing a developer or being sued by a homeowner? Look at recent meeting minutes. Are there recurring maintenance issues that suggest bigger problems? And look at any rules that might affect how you use the property, like rental restrictions if you ever want to lease it out in the future, or pet restrictions. In Maryland, the timeline is different. Buyers typically get a similar review period, but the specific requirements and what triggers the clock vary by how the contract is written. In DC, if you're buying a condo, the association has to provide certain disclosures, and the district has its own set of requirements around what the association must deliver and when. The bottom line is the same in all jurisdictions. Don't treat the HOA or condo packet as a formality. Be sure to read it. Here's why this matters practically. I've seen deals fall apart because the buyer got the HOA packet on a Friday afternoon, the 3-day window burned through the weekend, and they never actually read the reserve study that showed the association was about to impose a $15,000 special assessment. That's not hypothetical. That happened in a building in Reston, and it could have been avoided if the buyer had just blocked out an hour to review the financials. So during this contract period, you're also working with your lender to finalize your loan. They're going to ask you for updated documents, sometimes the same documents they already asked for and you provided. Don't get frustrated, just send them. And whatever you do, don't change jobs, don't open new credit cards, don't make large purchases, don't co-sign anyone else's loan, and do not move money around between accounts without telling your lender first. I know this sounds like common sense, but I can't tell you how many times a buyer has torpedoed their own financing 2 weeks before closing because they decided to buy furniture on a new store credit card, or they deposited a large cash gift without a paper trail. In the DMV, where closing timelines are tight and competition is fierce, you can't afford to give your lender any reason to pause. Phase 5, the appraisal. If you're getting a mortgage, your lender is going to order an appraisal of the property. An independent appraiser comes out, evaluates the home, looks at comparable sales in the area, and determines what the property is worth. Here is where it gets interesting. Because this market has so many micro neighborhoods, appraisals can be a bit tricky. A home in McLean might be a quarter mile from a home in Vienna, but they're in different school districts, different tax jurisdictions, and have completely different price points. An appraiser who does not know the area might pull comps from the wrong side of a boundary line and come up low. Same thing in DC. A townhouse in Logan Circle and a townhouse in Shaw might be 6 blocks apart, but have a significant gap in value. And in Maryland, the difference between being inside versus outside the Beltway in Montgomery County can swing values by 10 to 15%. If the appraisal comes in below your contract price, you have options. You can renegotiate the price with the seller, you can bring additional cash to cover the gap, or you can challenge the appraisal with additional comps. Or if you have an appraisal contingency in your contract, you can walk away and get your earnest money back. Here's my honest advice. In a competitive DMV market, some buyers waive the appraisal contingency to make their offer stronger. If you're going to do that, make sure you have the cash reserves to cover a potential gap, and make sure your agent has done a thorough comparative market analysis before you write the offer. You do not want surprises at this stage. We're getting close now. You can see the finish line. There's one more phase that trips people up. Phase 6, the final countdown. This is the last week or two before closing, and there are several things happening simultaneously. Your lender is finalizing the loan. They're going to issue a closing disclosure, which is a detailed breakdown of every dollar in your transaction. Your loan terms, your monthly payment, your closing costs, everything. Federal law requires you to receive this at least 3 business days before closing. Review it carefully, compare it to the loan estimate you received when you applied. If something looks off, ask about it immediately. Do not wait until you're sitting at the settlement table. You're also going to do your final walkthrough. This is your last chance to walk through the property before it becomes yours. Make sure the sellers have moved out, make sure any repairs that they agreed to do have been completed, and make sure the property is in the same general condition as the time you wrote your offer. This is not a formality. I've seen clients discover during the final walkthrough that the sellers removed fixtures that were supposed to stay, or that a pipe burst after the sellers moved out. Catch it now, not after you own the property. Here's the DMV specific part of this phase that surprises people: the wire fraud risk. When your settlement company sends you wiring instructions for your closing funds, verify those instructions. Verify them again if you did previously by using the phone number that you looked up independently, not a phone number in the email. Wire fraud targeting real estate transactions is a real and growing problem nationally and in our area. One bad wire and your down payment is gone. I'm not being dramatic. This happens. Phase 7, closing day. Congratulations. Let's discuss some fees, transfer taxes, and recordation taxes, because this is where the real money is. In Virginia, the buyer typically pays a recordation tax on the deed and on the mortgage. The state rate is 25 cents per $100 of value, and your city or county can add up to 1/3 of that on top. The seller typically pays the grantor tax, which is $1 per thousand of the sales price. And in Northern Virginia specifically, there's an additional regional fee. When you add it all up on a $700,000 home in Fairfax County, you're looking at several $1,000s in transfer-related costs. In Maryland, it's a completely different structure. You've got a state transfer tax of 0.5%, county transfer taxes that vary by jurisdiction, and recordation taxes that are set by each county individually. Montgomery County has one of the higher recordation tax rates in the state. And here's a piece of good news for first-time buyers in Maryland. If you've never owned a home in the state transfer tax drops to 0.25%. That can save you real money. And then there's DC. The district has some of the highest transfer and recordation taxes in the country. The combined rate for residential property over $400,000 is nearly 3%, split between the buyer paying the recordation tax and the seller paying the transfer tax. However, DC has a first-time homebuyer program that reduces the recordation tax if you qualify. On a $650,000 condo in Petworth or Columbia Heights, that's a savings of nearly $5,000. Here's the part that surprises people. First time in DC means your first home in the district, not your first home ever. So even if you owned a place in Virginia before, you could still qualify. Now, who is sitting at the closing table? In Virginia, settlement is typically handled by a title company or a settlement attorney. In Maryland, an attorney is required to be involved in the closing. In DC, it's similar to Virginia, typically a title company, but the customs and practices can differ. The bottom line is that your settlement agent is the air traffic controller for your closing. And then in the DMV, they need to know the specific rules for whichever jurisdiction your property is in. At the table, you're going to sign a lot of documents: the deed of trust, the promissory note, the closing disclosure, various affidavits and disclosures. Your settlement agent will walk you through each one. And once everything is signed and your funds are received, the settlement company records the deed with the local government. In Virginia, the seller's proceeds are sent within 2 business days of closing. In Maryland and DC, funds are typically dispersed the same day. And then you get the keys. That moment, after all the paperwork and all the stress and all the competing offers and all the inspections, you hold the keys to your home. And I'll tell you, after 27 years of doing this, that moment never gets old. So let's zoom out. You came into this video maybe thinking the home buying process was 4 or 5 basic steps. Now you know it's 7 phases, each with DMV specific details that can save you thousands of dollars or keep you from losing a deal entirely. You know that pre-approval in this market is not casual. You know that the search moves fast and crosses jurisdictional lines. You know that the contract you sign depends on which state or jurisdiction you're buying in. You know about HOA disclosure timelines that can make or break your deal. You know about appraisal challenges in a micro neighborhood market. And you know that closing costs in DC, Maryland, and Virginia are completely different animals. That is the kind of information that actually makes a difference. Not generic advice from a national article. Real local specific knowledge from someone who has been in these transactions thousands of times. If this video saved you even one surprise, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. And if you're getting ready to buy in the DMV, whether you're relocating from out of state or you've been here for years and you're ready to make your next move, click the link in the description to schedule a strategy session with our team at The Collective. We will build you a custom timeline based on where you are right now and where you want to be. That is what we do. Let us get you home.